Okay, we're live on YouTube and we're also live on Facebook. And it's good to see people coming in here on Facebook. Please tell us where you're coming from. And if you're on YouTube, please tell us where you're watching from as well. And send us in your comments and send us in your questions, because we've got a lot to talk about today. What an exciting week it's been, and what an emotional week for many people as well. So much happening worldwide in the United Kingdom, and of course also in the United States of America. And that's a big issue which we'll be talking about later in the program. Good to see folk watching on YouTube and also watching on Facebook. Let's begin. It's Saturday, it's Scotland, and it's 1 p.m. And we're back in original form, the legible, credible, inevitable storm, which is A Force for Good, coming to you live from our nerve centre here in the great British city of Glasgow, with me, your host, Alistair McConaughey. Bennett's calling from Inverkip, and Alan says hello. Good to see you, Stacey. Well, what an emotional roller coaster of a week it's been. We're going to start talking about the COVID carry-on pantomime. Then we're going to get to the polls, which show apparently the separatists in the lead. And we're going to be talking about what we're going to do about that. And we're also going to be looking at, of course, the election over in the United States, and given a few insights into that and a few pointers, and also some advice on how to stay sane in this crazy world that we're in at the moment. Pauline sending a flag through there, and James says hi from Cooper. David from Elgin says, keep sticking it to the deadly inept SNP. We certainly will. Dorothea, hi from County Tyrone, watching on YouTube. And Derek from Perth, and Richard also from Perth. Good to see you in again. Well, you know, before I get onto the COVID carry-on pantomime, I want to talk about a wee thing that I saw yesterday that was circulating on the internet, and we put it up on our Facebook page, and it's about Remembrance Sunday, which is tomorrow. Hi, Stacey. Hi, May. Hi, Bill. And as you know, the remembrance services have been cancelled and the remembrance parades have been cancelled. And quite frankly, that's an outrage, because it is an attack upon well-established British institutions. And I know many of us have a fear that if this thing continues for much longer, all these established British institutions and events may just simply go by the wayside, because they'll have been forgotten about, they'll have been suppressed and forgotten about. So we have to keep these things alive, whether it's simply Christmas or whether it's things like Remembrance Day. So somebody pointed out yesterday that the government says we can exercise outdoors. Well, war memorials are outdoors, so why don't we exercise our way there for 11 a.m. in the morning? And why don't we stop to catch our breath for 2 minutes? Silence, and then you can exercise your way back home again. But it seems an outrage that remembrance services and parades should not be allowed. So let's do what we can. And we do know that there are going to be various people exercising their way to George Square, to the cenotaph in George Square tomorrow for 11 a.m. And that might be something that you'd be interested in knowing about, and perhaps interested in taking some exercise to go along to that as well. As far as we understand, it's simply an informal gathering at the cenotaph in George Square, but it's certainly something that's worthy of some support. So let's not let the system just keep us down in this way in which they're trying to do at the moment. And there's a really good article, which I'm just about to get to, that really nailed it to the SNP in the Daily Telegraph. And I mean, talking about nailing them to the wall. Oh my goodness, that's just coming up in a minute. Harry, why is the lettering shown the wrong way around? Because we're broadcasting on Facebook, and that's how it broadcasts on an Android. If you want to see the letters the right way around, go to our YouTube, when we'll put the link there up, because we're broadcasting live on YouTube as well. There we go. Watch the video fully on YouTube. We're trying to get most people onto watching on YouTube, because that's really where the action is at the end of the day. So yeah, the COVID carry-on pantomime is creating far greater problems and far greater illness for other things rather than COVID. Other diseases, as we've been pointing out for weeks now, are going by the wayside. Operations are not being done. Screening is not being done. All of this is creating a public health disaster in the long term. And Alison Pearson pointed out that a devastating report from Macmillan Cancer Support estimates that 50,000 extra people have cancer and don't know it because they have not been screened properly during this period, which is a crime. And I hope our politicians are thinking about this, because people will be held responsible for this, and people should be held responsible for it. So what about this societal and health ruin that we're heading towards in that regard? It's very concerning, and politicians need to wake up, and they need to stop taking us for a joke on this particular matter, because we can see what's happening. We can all see what's happening, and patience will run out. Alison concludes here in her article that the Prime Minister has lost his intellectual self-confidence because he's been captured by self-serving state-funded scientists, urging him to close down the economy and society, egged on by virtue-signalling middle-class journalists, many of whom can keep working comfortably from home, while the rest of us have to make the best of a very, very bad deal. Well, I was so pleased to see a couple of people, Neil McCluskey and Christine McNeil from Scotland, writing in the Daily Telegraph, Sturgeon's totalitarian state is worse than virus. Now, that's a powerful article. We're going to scan that and we'll put that up on our Facebook page today. But oh my goodness me, this really gets into them to an extent, to a depth of knowledge that's really quite incredible. It points out that the Scottish administration's restrictions are so disproportionate that, quote, they are a form of psychological abuse perpetrated on the people based on a false narrative that exaggerates the threat posed by COVID-19 to the majority. Lives are being upended. By the end of 2020, 100,000 people in Scotland are expected to have lost their jobs. Free association is curtailed. Children and young people are severely affected, even though only one person under 30 in Scotland has died of COVID-19. The restrictions are impeding treatment in the NHS for illnesses such as heart disease, stroke, and cancer, and deaths from these dwarf fatalities from COVID. There are also concerns, as we know, that broadcasters, including the BBC and social media, are effectively subject to censorship on these matters. Lockdowns do not stop the disease, they postpone some infections until lockdown ends. It isn't stopping the virus or protecting the vulnerable or leading to herd immunity. With censorship, propaganda, and restriction of freedom, Scotland is increasingly resembling a totalitarian state. That is absolutely so true. Absolutely true. So true. Mark says, keep this flag flying high and proud. We certainly will, Mark. Thomas says, hi. TC says, good afternoon, all fellow Unionist friends out there in our wonderful United Kingdom. Thomas says, afternoon from Glenrothes. Dorothea says, Westminster keeps saying that the NHS should be operating normally, so why are people not getting treatment? Because it's not operating normally. The shine has come off the NHS. We were all supportive of the NHS during the initial lockdown. They should have taken that seriously, and then they should simply have said, right, we've done our bit. We're not going to push for even more gratitude from the plebs. But no, they had to keep pushing us. And now the shine is wearing off and people are actually turning against the NHS. So the NHS has to think about that, because the shine is wearing off and people are going without necessary operations, and these people are not happy. And in fact, this point was made by Sherelle Jacobs in her article, Time to Stop the Advance of the COVID State. The health service has lost its untouchable sheen. It will still be difficult, but suddenly arguing for a reformed NHS no longer seems like a complete pipe dream. That's absolutely so. It no longer seems like a complete pipe dream. During the beginning, we thought the NHS is now untouchable. Unfortunately, it's proven to be full of contradictions, and it is now touchable, and people are saying, how can we reform it? This lady here, she also points out that what good things can possibly come from this? Well, maybe in time, and this was maybe a bit of a reach, but she says that maybe new towns will be built. She talks about mini Milton Keyneses peppering the suburbs. Well, Milton Keynes was inspired back in the 60s by kind of Californian open spaces and wide streets and that sort of thing. And it was a new town, and maybe there'll be more of those. That was one of the takeaways that she thinks might be coming out of this. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But if you're going to do that, you're going to have to get the borders properly controlled as well, because what an outrage that thousands of people have been coming in illegally over the channel this year, while we're meant to be in lockdown and while we're meant to be keeping out and properly testing people coming into the country. So lots of things are needing to be changed, and maybe it will be changed as a result of COVID in the long term. But in the short term, we have to look on all of those who lead us, whether from Westminster or from Holyrood, with a considerable degree of skepticism now, because they're really, really pushing it to the point where I would never have thought in my lifetime that I would see politicians actively destroying the economy and actively hurting people physically through this. So we can only hope and pray that people will arise who will challenge the present establishment, because establishments come and go. And that's one of the lessons of life, is that they can fall very, very quickly. And we'll be talking more about the power of the establishment when we speak about the American elections later in the program. So for now, let's go straight into the latest opinion polls, or so-called opinion poll, which opinion inverted commas, because we always have to remember that opinion polls are a black art. We always have to remember that. And we have to remember that they lead as much as reflect opinion, and that they're often used deliberately to exploit particular tendencies and to demoralize the public. They are a political weapon. We have to understand opinion polls as a political weapon. And we sent out an email update last night about this. So another one has come out saying that we are in the minority. So what can we do about it? Somebody contacted me yesterday, and they were concerned. They said, quote, "Sometimes I'm reasonably confident, but I'm not going to lie. I really fear things happening outside of my control when I have zero confidence in anyone sorting it out. I just can't understand what is happening to the United Kingdom," close quote. Well, I know exactly what this person means, and we all do feel that at times. Alan says, afternoon from Buckhind. Linda says, good afternoon from Unionist, Southeast London. Great to see you, Alistair. Great to see you in again, Linda. Like to have you watching every Saturday. Thank you for that. So yeah, we sent out an email update yesterday, and we quoted somebody who had written to us recently along the same sorts of topics. This person said, quote, I'm scared and dismayed to see support for the union crumbling as people begin to believe more, apparently, in the pro-separation rhetoric of the SNP. However, we are the quiet majority of real Brits who love our country. AFFG wrote an article recently about how good it felt to be British, to feel at home in any part of the United Kingdom. That is what I love and wish to protect. The combined cultures of each part of the UK that are all equally our own and equally each other's. That's what I love. Please keep on defending the union and its fantastic history. Thank you for that comment. Thank you for that comment. The combined cultures of each part of the UK that are all equally our own, but equally each other's. Lovely, lovely. And you know, this is the sort of way that we fight back against this, because we see some people saying, oh, we've got to have a blitz to make people like the United Kingdom. Well, in a way, yes, but really no, because it shouldn't be about getting people to like the United Kingdom or the Union. It's like saying, why should we like our own country? You know, the United Kingdom is our country. It is our one big country. And in that regard, all we have to do is just stand up for our country, not try to defend the union per se, as if it's sometimes going to be a good thing or a bad thing. Just defend our one big country, our United Kingdom, created by separate nations joining into one big country. And that's a wonderful thing. And to acknowledge that we have more in common than what divides us, that united we're greater than the sum of our parts. And to see those things, we wrote an article about this in our Union Heart, and we listed 10 basic points about our one big country, that we're a nation, not just a political state, that is Britain is our country as much as Scotland, that we're related as in a family. We're much more a family, quite literally. We're much more of that. And that a problem in any part of the family concerns us all. And so to really stand up for the United Kingdom as one big country, as a family, and not to try to break it down and just think about the parts of it. And so long as you do that, and so long as you treat it as one big country and try to do as much together as you can, rather than as much apart, try to do as much together. And do what all countries do to exist: protect our borders, stand for the sovereignty of the United Kingdom, keep control of our British-wide institutions, defend our economy, share our resources with each other, just behave like a country, and we'll be okay at the end of the day. To stand in unity together. And as Donald Trump, he always ends his speeches with a little phrase which is applicable to the United Kingdom, which I'm going to say here and now. He goes that we should teach our children to love our country, honor our history, and respect our great Union Jack flag. And you do those three things, you're going to have a good country. And you're going to have something that's going to survive through the years and through the decades and the centuries and the millennia. So just stand up for our one big country and things will be fine. And politically, I was glad to see Alistair Jack this week saying that he was not going to give the Scottish Nationalists another second referendum, quite rightly. We want him to start arguing the constitutional point, which is that a majority of seats in a devolved assembly is not a sufficient mandate for a referendum at all. Not nearly. I mean, that's an assembly which has been created and which is an arm of the British Parliament. So it's clearly not going to have a mandate, regardless of what the result is at the end of the day. The only way, as we've said in our article, which is on our website at aforceforgood.uk, is through the British Parliament. It's the British Parliament which decides, and it has to stand up for all of the people of the United Kingdom, because it's not just Scotland that's involved here. William says, excellent, good stuff, good to see you in, William. And that just reminds me, we've got one or two people there in the chat have asked for cards, Christmas cards. We have Christmas cards now. This is our wishing you a glorious British Christmas card, which is A5 in size. And on the back, it's got the Union Jack heart. And these are the kings and queens of the United Kingdom since the Glorious Revolution, and the William and Mary, hence the glorious British Christmas. And they are 5 cards for £4, which you can get from our shop. We'll put the link up there. Envelopes are not provided. And if you are already a Union supporter, that is, if you're giving us money support monthly, then simply request a pack and we'll send you a pack free of charge. Otherwise, you can get them on our website. But if you're a Union supporter, please request a pack free of charge. That's our gift to you. There they are up in the link there, and we'll put those up, put that up in the Facebook page as well. So how to help keep the United Kingdom together. We wanted to talk about this last week. We'll talk about it right now. And it is about ensuring that there are processes which are written down which will defend the United Kingdom. And one of those concepts is something called a Clarity Act. And a couple of really good letters in the Daily Telegraph this week. One from Lachlan Rhodes in Huntly in Aberdeenshire, entitled Saving the Union. And he's addressing this to the readers in England. And he's saying, we are not all rabid nationalists. There is noise about a second referendum, but how likely is this to deliver for the SNP? Nicola Sturgeon is autocratic and is supported by a supine and ineffectual administration. In its time in power, it has failed on almost every front. Its focus is not on delivering a better life for Scottish people, but on gaining independence. And if there was to be another referendum, God forbid, the terms must be, of course, different from 2014. It was too easy to say yes to the question, should Scotland be an independent country? A better question is, do you wish to secede from possibly the most successful union of countries ever conceived, which has opened up so many opportunities for the Scottish people? And he finishes by saying, we need the support of our friends across the United Kingdom. Please do not abandon us in our time of need. That's right. As we always say, if you're British, you're involved wherever you live in the United Kingdom, or indeed the world. And another person wrote in response to that, got a letter on the 3rd of November entitled Clarity for Scots, saying Lachlan Rhodes is right that the terms of another referendum must be different. After 2 close-run referendums on Quebec's separation, the Canadian government passed a Clarity Act in 2000 to bring the talk and anxiety of never-ending referendums under control and make the electorate aware of the consequences of its vote. Such an act applied to Scotland is needed. It cannot be right that a vote for the Union lasts only until the next referendum, but a vote for separation is forever. That the franchise includes 16-year-olds, foreign citizens, and criminals serving limited sentences, but excludes thousands of native-born Scots resident elsewhere in the UK. That there is no insistence on a minimum turnout, and that a majority of 50% plus one could be used to destroy a great country. What currency would be used? What about the national debt? What would be the attitude of the European Union to an independent Scotland? These questions must be answered. Very good there from somebody in Kirkcudbrightshire. Ricky says the SNP deflect and they shift the blame. The party with no shame. That rhymes. That's good. Linda says, Alistair, what would be an independent Scottish currency? The SNP do not have a clue. Absolutely. Well, there's a good article that's been written about the Clarity Act. It's written by a lady called Effie Deans. That's a pseudonym, but she often writes interesting material. We'll put this up in the link. It's called A Clarity Act, and she breaks it down as well and suggests the sorts of things that should be written into something in a proper legal act. We have to be careful about that, of course, because we don't want, by doing so, we don't want to give the impression that the devolved assemblies are somehow more powerful or have greater authority than they do. The relationship has to be very clear. The sorts of things that we're talking about in our mandate for unity, for example, though, could go in to such an act so that it clarifies what would have to happen for such a referendum to go ahead. Because the point is, we have to make breaking up our one big country as difficult as possible. And we have to be open about that, because we are defending the integrity of the United Kingdom. Right now, the bar has been set incredibly low, and the enemies of our United Kingdom can see that, and they know it. And in fact, Gerry Adams pointed this out very well when he said back in February 2014, he said, quote, "It's now clear that the so-called United Kingdom is held together by a thread, and that thread can be unraveled as a result of referenda in Scotland or elsewhere, and indeed in Ireland," close quote. So he saw that at the moment the British establishment was holding the United Kingdom together simply through the referendum process. What we're saying is that the bar is far too low, that we need to start setting that bar much, much higher and figuring out ways in order to ensure that that bar is set very high. Because right now the Nats are feeling their oats, because it's so potentially easy to destroy the United Kingdom. As that letter I quoted said, you just need 50 plus one in a vote, regardless of what the turnout is, and you've destroyed one of the world's greatest nations. That's simply unacceptable. So that has to change. That has to change, and it will change, because there's people like ourselves and others picking up on this now. So we are at the vanguard of promoting authentic unionism, which is going to save this United Kingdom. Believe me, people think it's all over. No, it's not all over. It's only just beginning. And the fight to ensure our United Kingdom survives forevermore is beginning. And it's beginning with groups like A Force for Good, who have been studying this now for well on 10 years, and we understand it from top to bottom and inside out and upside down. So we're going to go now straight through to YouTube, and we're only going to broadcast on YouTube. And we're going to be talking about the US presidential election and how on earth what on earth has happened there, and what are the implications for the United Kingdom and the Union. So we're going to go over onto YouTube. So we'll put up the YouTube link. You simply click on it and you'll get to see us on YouTube. But we're trying to get people now through onto YouTube. So please do come over onto YouTube. And if you can watch without an account, but if you've got a YouTube account, you can also comment and thumbs up there, please. Okay, folks, see you over on YouTube. Good stuff. Good stuff. We need to get 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, and we deserve hundreds of thousands of subscribers on YouTube. But it's a long, tedious process, but we're going to get there in the end, because we've certainly got the ability, and we've got enough to say here on YouTube. Once we've got 1,000, opportunities open up on YouTube for things like monetization and also outside broadcasting with mobile phones and stuff like that. So we really need to get 1,000 by the end of the year. So that's why we're so keen to get people onto YouTube. Now, the US election, where to even begin with this? And we've got a lot of interesting things to say. Where Eagles Dare says, been watching the Charlie Kirk show. I'm reading Charlie Kirk's book at the moment, which is a good book, a very good book. He's a very interesting character. Leslie says, good afternoon. Good afternoon to you, Leslie. Yeah. So I'm going to ask people, have any of you out there heard of the laptop from hell? Do you know what I mean when I talk about the laptop from hell? Well, the reason I'm saying it is because this was a laptop that belonged to Hunter Biden. Yeah, Where Eagles Dare's got that one. And Jonathan says, yeah, Biden. And unless you were on social media and unless you were watching the Trump campaign closely, you wouldn't know that Hunter Biden had a highly compromising laptop. Now, this was, as I say, Joe Biden's son, and it said that on it were various things, but one of which was proof of collusion with Chinese companies, that he was using his father's name to get money from various Chinese companies. This was a major story for about for 2 weeks running up to the election. But unless you were on social media, you didn't really hear about it. The mainstream media in this country and indeed worldwide suppressed it to an astonishing extent. And it just showed the extent to which all of the mainstream media were biased against Trump. Even here in Scotland, every single outlet biased against Trump. A huge story that suggested that the Biden family were compromised as far as money with China is concerned just went by the wayside, wasn't even talked about, and was hugely suppressed by the mainstream media in the USA. A story that would have had the potential to really change the election in some ways. So that's something that one is facing clearly, is mainstream media bias. The other thing that one is facing, of course, is big tech bias. And we always give a plug to this book, which we've finished now. It's called Deleted: Big Tech's Battle to Erase the Trump Movement and Steal the Election. And it looked at big tech since the 2016 election. Big tech was accused mainly by the Democrats of inadvertently delivering the Trump victory in 2016. And I do believe that the Trump victory in 2016 had a huge lot to do with the fact that he was all over social media. Millions of people seeing him and his message being directly sent to everybody in the world. And after 2016, this was realized by the various powers that be. And there was in fact, there was an article here in The Guardian, 2016, the year Facebook became the bad guy. And we'll put that link up there. And it points out that none of 2016's controversies have rattled Facebook as much as the criticism that its failure to clamp down on fake news, combined with the way its algorithm places users in polarized bubbles, shaped the outcome of the presidential election. So they realized, Facebook, Twitter, Google, YouTube, and so on, realized that they were allowing the Trump voters basically to have their say, and that wasn't good enough. So they brought in various algorithm changes. And in January 18, they brought in an algorithm change, that's a code change, which saw Donald Trump's Facebook engagement drop by 45%. And we've got the report on that as well. Trump's Facebook engagement declined by 45% following algorithm change. And it wasn't just Trump, it was lots of small c conservative and major Republican social media accounts. And we also noticed in our Facebook towards the end of 2018, we were having a harder time getting our message out as well. And they also changed the share algorithm. In the past, if you shared something from AFFG, it would go into your friend's news feed. It would go into your news feed, and all your friends would see it. And in 2018, November 2018, they changed it so that if you shared something, it only got posted on your Facebook homepage. And so your friends would only see it if they dropped into your Facebook profile and had a look at what you had posted. But previously, it was just going viral because it was getting posted into hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of news feeds exponentially. So those little things were done. Other things that were done were some sites were simply removed entirely right across the board. One of the major people who promoted Trump in 2016 was an American controversialist called Alex Jones. And he was no doubt responsible for hundreds of thousands of votes for Trump. All of his social media platforms were removed from all of the companies overnight. And of course, right up until just to the day of the election, they were removing sites. And our Twitter site, which was the biggest pro-union Twitter site in the world for a campaigning group, we got, I believe, caught up in an anti-Trump algorithm, and we got taken off completely unjustly. And we're still, as you know, suspended. But after having read that book, after having read Deleted, I realize now what has happened to us, because I didn't want to screech about it when I didn't even know what had happened. But what's happened is that we got hit with the claim of platform manipulation and spam, which this book points out is simply a catch-all. And I couldn't understand why nobody was responding to our very well-crafted appeals. And as this book has suggested to me, nobody was reading them. And I didn't understand why, after all our appeals, that they justified it by saying that we had been a fake account, until I read this book and realized that nobody had read our appeals, and nobody has even to this day looked at our account, that it's all just done automated. And so there's a lot wrong with big tech, and it needs to be changed. And interestingly, this person points out that a very good report was done by some professors at the American Institute for Behavioral Research and Technology, and they looked at lots of search terms from Google and the extent to which Google would hide conservative or Republican stories and search terms. So if you searched for something you didn't get really what you're looking for, you would just get a mainstream source. And this professor believes that the pro-Hillary Clinton bias on Google shifted at least 2.6 million votes in her favor in 2016. That's a remarkable number of votes that these professors are reckoning Google was able to deliver to Clinton via manipulating the search results. So if that was happening in 2016, what on earth was it like in 2020? And this person who wrote this book, Alam Bokhari, he's obviously got a lot of insight. And this was written before the election, of course, before the election result. And he says, having read this book, do you really think that big tech, with its vast deposits of information on all of us, cannot identify exactly who the Trump voters are, what they care about, and how to make them go Democrat in 2020? The big tech companies were caught napping in 2016, engaging only in minor acts of bias like censoring search suggestions about Hillary's health. They won't be caught napping again. Nothing less than a titanic on-the-ground effort from Republican activists will stop them from stealing the election this time, and even that may not be enough. If by some miracle Trump manages to overcome the forces of big tech bias that are arrayed against him, his next administration will need to get serious about the problem. Tinkering around the edges won't do, not just to safeguard American democracy and fair access to the digital public square, but also to safeguard consumer rights for everyone, Republican and Democrat. The relationship between tech platforms and their users needs to be completely recalibrated. As I've repeated throughout this book, it is unacceptable that big tech platforms can erase years of investment and work that you may have put into a social media account simply because they don't like your views. Without access to tech platforms, you are, in the modern world, effectively a second-class citizen, and due process must be imposed. Amen to that. And this book has made me realize that what actually happened to us and what's happening to all of these small c conservative sites is a form of intellectual property theft. Intellectual property theft, because we put, and so many people have done it, so much work into our platform on Twitter for 8 years. And it was just essentially stolen from us. It was a form of intellectual property theft, and we have had no recourse, and there is no recourse available to us to sort it. So all of that is so wrong, and it needs to be changed. And who's going to change it? Well, at the moment, the system works very much favorably for Biden and the Democrats. So if they get in, they're probably not going to change it. In fact, they may well, God forbid, but they may well make it worse. If Trump gets in, he's going to have to sort that out, and to do it fairly, because everybody benefits from fair social media. So what's happened in the USA is a combination of mainstream media bias and big tech bias, and very possibly exploiting serious weaknesses within the American electoral process itself. Time will tell exactly about that. Linda says Trump needs to open up a brand new media platform. Well, that's a thought. If he was to lose, he could set up, or he could at least support alternative media platforms which struggle at the moment. There's lots of millionaires and billionaires in America, but they seem to just be, they don't put their money into those sorts of things. It's only your George Soroses that puts his money into all the sort of left-wing revolutionary sorts of things. But there surely are millionaires and billionaires in America who can fund alternative social media platforms. At least I would have thought so. Anyway, I don't know if you remember the 2008 election. Well, that was Barack Obama, who had a lot of buzz behind him, against John McCain, who just was a completely flatlined, basically. And in 2008, Barack Obama beat the record for the popular vote. Okay, got a huge number of popular votes, more votes than any president had ever got before, 69 million votes. Well, interestingly enough, at this election, Donald Trump has beaten that record. He's beaten Barack Obama's record. And Donald Trump, for anybody who can see his rallies, had a huge amount of energy behind him as well, perhaps even more so than Barack Obama. But guess what? Joe Biden, who couldn't get 7 people to a rally, has beaten Donald Trump. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. How can it possibly be explained? Somebody sent me this morning, this picture. It's Barack Obama with his 69 million votes. And that's one of his rallies. And this is Joe Biden with his 72 million votes at one of his rallies. That doesn't make any sense. There's something funny going on. And of course, what it looks like is that there has been an exploitation of a very serious weakness that exists in the US electoral process, which is to allow unverifiable mail-in ballots to be used. Now, how on earth that could have been allowed for all these years and accepted for all these years in America boggles belief. It boggles belief that the mail-in ballots are essentially largely unverifiable. That's madness. That's utter madness, but it seems to have been allowed, and it's been definitely exploited to an unbelievable extent at this election. And of course, it's been exploited by those who have got it in for Donald Trump. And furthermore, the system apparently allows votes to be counted, to be found and to be presented to be counted after the close of play on election day. Now, here in the United Kingdom, if you vote in person or if you vote with a mail-in ballot, everything has to be in by 10 p.m. at night. And if your ballots arrive an hour late or they don't get in the mail until the next day or something like that, they're not counted. There's a cutoff point. The cutoff point for postal is the same as the cutoff point for in-person. And that's the way that it should be in any functioning democracy. There's nothing strange about that, but apparently not so in the USA. So you're looking at a system there in the USA, which is almost third world ineptitude. And maybe one good thing about this that's coming out is that exposure, the exposure of how inept the American electoral system actually is as far as mail-in ballots are concerned. Why should in-person voting be limited by the clock, but mail-in ballots, mail-in voting is not limited by the clock? Why are you limited by the clock when you vote in person, but you're not limited by the clock when you send in a ballot through the post? That makes no sense whatsoever, and it's clearly wrong, and it's clearly open to massive exploitation. Massive exploitation. And that's without even considering the extent to which these mail-in ballots are often not verifiable. And so a system that allows unverifiable ballots to be counted is just an illegitimate system that has lost integrity. It's third world level abuse. But at least, as I say, is being exposed now. So, do I believe that there's been fraud? Well, fraud is a horrendous thing because every illegitimate ballot, every fraudulent ballot nullifies a legal, properly done vote. So all I'll say is this: all those dead people who voted for Biden, they should be thoroughly ashamed of themselves. Now, you know, people say, oh, look, Alistair, it's another country, it's not going to affect us too much. Well, I'm afraid that's not correct, because everything that happens in the United States of America ultimately affects the United Kingdom. As I've said before, and Sturgeon knows this very well. As I've said before, Joe Biden is no friend of a United Kingdom. He's coming from an Irish Republican tradition, and he will not give us a deal on Brexit unless we put a hard border down the Irish Sea and effectively split up the United Kingdom in two. So he's not a friend of the United Kingdom in that regard. And talking about Sturgeon there, she put out a very nasty, a very gloating anti-Trump tweet yesterday, and she was talking about him, quote unquote, raging against democracy. And I thought, you know, that's really cute of you to say that, considering you, Sturgeon, have been raging against the 2014 referendum and the 2016 referendum for all these years. You're the one, Sturgeon, that's raging against democracy. Oh, what power the giftie gie us to see ourselves as others see us. Madam Sturgeon, you should take those words to heart. So, furthermore, it's truly appalling if she is not bothered about this obvious iniquity, this obvious problem that the American voting system has got. She should be able to see in her clearer moments that there's a serious problem with mail-in balloting in the United States that needs to get sorted out. But she doesn't choose to point that out or anything like that. She's cheering it all on at the moment. So in other words, it's like she doesn't really care about the Democratic vote. She doesn't care about the integrity of the vote. And that's a shame. That's a shame, and it's a disgrace. But it's what we've come to expect from a party that spends its life trying to figure out how to gerrymander the franchise in order to squeak a majority in at a second referendum, which they are obsessed with doing. So what can we do when we're watching this? You know, a lot of people have been getting kind of emotional about it and bothered about it and upset about it because they can see what's going on. Well, we can't go and live in the woods. You know, we can't run away from it, nor can we go and live in Australia, as people used to say in the past. Well, have you looked at Australia these days? Nobody would want to go to Australia, much less New Zealand. So what you have to do, basically, is you have to just find the calm. Okay, you have to have one foot in order and you have to have the other foot in the chaos of this world, and you have to find the balance and you have to find the center of calm, and you have to move forward confidently into the fray. You have to go fearlessly into the fight with a calm center. And when you do that, you also need to cut out or seriously cut down the level to which you consume mainstream media, because the mainstream media really has got it in for us all. And we've seen that with this COVID carry-on, with the notable exception of talk radio, some articles in the Daily Mail, and most of the articles in the Telegraph. All the other newspapers, certainly here in Scotland, they're all just promoting lockdown. They're all promoting basically this anti-human agenda. And so the mainstream media really is not our friend. We can use it to get information, but we have to understand that the people behind mainstream media, very often they've got serious problems in their approach to their fellow man, basically. So cut down on the mainstream media, and you find a lot of solace on YouTube. You know, there's some great people on YouTube. There's some great conversations. There's also BitChute and there's Rumble. These are also video channels that you can get stuff on. And there's also just other sites out there, and you find people who can give you just good information about how to deal with this sort of stuff, and not just the horrible stuff that you hear from the mainstream media all the time. So make alternative media your friend, where you'll find the sense at the end of the day. And be a good example to others, you know. Don't succumb to fear. Don't be demoralized. That was our message in our email update yesterday. And don't be intimidated, because if they can intimidate you, they can control you. And don't give up. Just go fearlessly into the fight. That's a message to you. Now, if you want to get our email update, go to aforceforgood.uk/support. And I've been talking so much just now, I've forgotten to mention our little wee badge, where you can wear it on your sleeve. And that's our heart badge, and this is our flag badge, which is the same as this behind us. And you'll get those at our shop, and we'll put up the link to that as well. Now, in the few minutes that remain, I'm going to talk about this week in British history, because we love our history, and the past informs the present. We honor our history and we don't apologize for it, and we don't really like people who want to make a bad issue of it. So we stand uprightly for our history, warts and all. Anyway, lots of good stuff this coming week, which is to say from today, 7th of November, to Friday the 13th. On this day in 2002, the people of Gibraltar voted overwhelmingly in a referendum to reject the concept of shared sovereignty with Spain. They stood very strongly, 98.5% of them, to reject that notion. That was the second referendum which had delivered the same result. Tomorrow it is Remembrance Sunday, and as we mentioned, you're still allowed to exercise, so why don't you exercise your way to your local cenotaph or war memorial and take a breather for a couple of minutes at it. And we know there's going to be some people who will be doing that tomorrow at 11 o'clock in George Square in Glasgow at the glorious cenotaph there. On the 10th of November, the Berlin Wall fell back in 1989, which was largely due to the British Army and the Americans keeping a constant presence in West Germany. And I am proud to say that my father was an officer in the British Army of the Rhine, and I stayed in West Germany for 2 or 3 years with my parents looking after me, I might add. That was some time ago. And then on the 11th of November is Armistice Day, which this year will be the 100th anniversary of the erection of the cenotaph in Whitehall, and also the 100th anniversary of the burial of the unknown soldier at Westminster Abbey. And the story of the grave of the unknown warrior is a fascinating story, which we'll also be putting up on our Facebook page. On the 12th of November in 1933, the Empire sculptor passed away. That was Glaswegian John Tweed, who's known for producing many iconic statues which esteemed the men of the British Empire. And he was born in Glasgow in 1869. And on the 12th of November, the Tirpitz was sunk by British bombers. And on the 13th of November in 1761, John Moore was again a Glaswegian who was born in Glasgow, and he's most famous for being the commander of the British forces who defeated the French at the Battle of Corunna, and who was killed at that battle, but who lived long enough to know that he had won a victory. And his was the first statue to be unveiled in George Square in 1819, with his likeness cast from brass cannons from that battle. And there's a famous poem that many people would have learned when they were at school, when children learned poems, called The Burial of Sir John Moore After Corunna. Slowly and sadly we laid him down, from the field of his fame, fresh and gory. We carved not a line, and we raised not a stone, but we left him alone with his glory. And on the 13th of November in 2017, A Force for Good launched our London Town Unionists campaign. And a group of us went down and we were outside Parliament with our banners and our flags, and even a 1606 flag of the Union. And we were campaigning to stop a second independence referendum. As I said at the time in a press release, we're using this opportunity to launch our London Town Unionist campaign, which seeks to reach out to and interest and mobilise the latent support for Scotland in the UK, which exists in London. It's our first event in England, and it's fitting that we should be doing this outside the centre of our democracy, the Houses of Parliament. So if you are in London and you want to be in touch with us, well, please do contact us, please do tell us, and please do sign up at aforceforgood.uk/support. Just give us your name and your email, and we'll stay in touch with you with our fortnightly email updates. And please also check out our shop, where we've got these new Christmas cards, which are for sale. They're free if you're a union supporter. That is, if you're a monthly donor. So please go to, if you want to become a union supporter, go to aforceforgood.uk/union-supporters, and you can sign up to support us from anything from £5 a month onwards, and that works out at £1.15 a week. So it's not a whole lot, but if you can do that, please consider doing that. Or you might just want to drop us a one-off donation. But we do need your help, folks. We are given a positive message of hope, and we are keeping this union together. And believe us, we will win. We will win. There's no question about it. We will keep the United Kingdom together. But it is a battle for the ages. It's not something that's ever going to go away. But we are at the forefront of making the case for our one big country. So please do support our work. And it wouldn't be a Force for Good Saturday street stall without me giving a wee plug to our wee book for the Union, which is a lovely wee stocking filler. It's only a £5, and it's our story of what our one big country is all about. It's in full colour, it fits into your back pocket, and it's well put together, and it's an easy read, and you can read it within an hour, and you'll learn a lot of good stuff there. Derek says he's already signed up. Good. Yes, we got that. We got that from you. Thank you. Stephen says, I served in Germany. Regular trips to what was then a divided Berlin. Good for you. Good for you, Stephen. Thank you. Thank you for your service. David says, Sturgeon using her show on the BBC to cover the US and other matters. Oh no. Well, you see, we don't watch that. It's too much. It's too much to watch that. It's unbearable. So, but yeah, the BBC are just giving her a platform so that she can rot off about all these the twisted notions that she has. When I complained to the BBC about their bias, the justification was the need for the COVID-19 message to get out. Mission creep now. Exactly, that's what she's doing. She's just got that platform. She's just pushing it. And how are we ever going to get her off it? Well, there is going to be a Holyrood election next year. Let us hope that some new voices will stand up and shout her down. Folks, it's just a back or two. We're going to call a halt to this. We've covered a lot of topics. I hope that we've given you some good knowledge. that we've given you some good thoughts and ideas to take away, and that we've helped to boost your mind, body, and soul a little bit during this broadcast. Because if we're about anything, it's about staying positive and staying strong. So please, if you're not already a subscriber, please click the red button to subscribe and hit the bell for notifications. It may ask you to set up a Google account, in which case just follow through the process. And once you've got a YouTube account, you can chat and you can thumbs up, and you can do those things. So folks, it just remains for me to say thank you very much for watching. God bless the United Kingdom, and God save the Queen.